Welcome, y'all folks, to the first episode of Horror Hysteria of 2024. I am just simply going to continue the old series of reviews where I left off, which means that since this is a Friday that I'm filming this on, this is a franchise Friday, and I'm going to be talking to you about a movie that is in a franchise that I wouldn't actually describe as horror, but that certainly has monsters in it, that centers around ghosts as the principal characters in a way, and that originated in a different country from my own, not in the typical Anglosphere horror films that many of you may be more familiar with. However, if you are in any way at all familiar with manga, you might be familiar with this, and you might scold me for choosing this one to talk about, because I'm going to talk to you about the movie Bleach. Bleach is a movie from, let me just double check. Bleach is a movie from 2018, and it is based off of a manga, a Japanese comic that ran from somewhere early 2000s to like 2016, if I'm right on the top of my head. And that had a pretty successful animated adaptation. It got pretty big in the West as well. Outside of Japan, it is also known as one of the big three of shonen manga, alongside Naruto and One Piece, the latter of which is still ongoing after, Jesus, almost 30 years at this point. But Bleach ran a lot shorter out of those three, and was a bit different in tone, I would say. But it was certainly not outright horror. Now, why am I still talking about it anyway? Well, it is still dealing with monsters, and that is kind of what I'm chiefly concerned with in this series. Specifically with demons and ghosts. Well, ghosts and corrupted ghosts that you could sort of see as demons. Hungry ghosts in like the Buddhist kind of sense, or the Shintoist sense, which is where Bleach gets its inspirations. The main character and a lot of the other principal characters in the series are so-called Shinigami, which can be literally translated as death gods. Well, while in the official translations it's translated as Soul Reaper. So it's more like they're Grim Reapers, they're psychopomps, they're people, spirits that guide the souls of the deceased to the afterlife, and in some cases also destroy them, at least the bad ones. Now, the manga had a very successful animated adaptation already, and in 2018 a live-action adaptation was released, which was a movie. It was only like an hour and 48 minutes, but it was a very faithful adaptation. The first arc of the manga, where everything still takes place on Earth before they go into the afterlife and do a whole bunch of other stuff, is entirely covered by the movie. The movie does change the ending of it a bit to allow for it to stand on its own, where the manga and anime would continue on for many more arcs after this point. The movie puts a point at the end and says, okay, this is the only movie, the only live action movie for this that we're doing. And I think that was perhaps a bold move, because a lot of people who would like to see this would likely want to see more of it. But I think it's also the right move, because it made it so that this was all that you were going to get. It was a completed story on its own, and you did not need to wait for this entire giant story to conclude 6 or 7 movies down the line, because that's how long the entire story goes. It does cover all of the major character introductions that take place in this first arc of the movie, and it does so decently well. All of the relationships that the main character Ichigo has are shown and explored a little bit, and the characterization is very well done. It's very on point. At a few points, I was thinking to myself, like, okay, maybe this movie crams a bit too many characters into it. Like, they could have maybe scrapped a few, because there's so many that get introduced, even for relatively small parts. But those characters that have relatively small parts also... let's turn back on the lights. Those characters that have relatively small parts aren't even really mentioned by name. They have their interactions with their friends, with the rest of the cast, but they're just there for the little bit of support that they need to give to the other characters around them that are more important to them, and prop them up a bit, or to deliver a quick joke. There's one guy in the class who only really shows up in the class every time something has happened to Ichigo, the main character, and he just goes in, comes into class and tells his friends, oh yeah, there was a truck that drove into Ichigo's house. And the friends are, of course, very concerned. Oh no, is he okay? And he goes, he was struck dead on the spot. And then Ichigo immediately shows up, hey, I'm perfectly fine. Oh, hey, there you are. And everything just goes on as well. And that happens like 2 more times as like a little bit of a running gag. But it kind of like establishes the dynamic he has with his friends very well. My candle is running low, so maybe I'm going to have a little bit less light in a bit. The movie starts off with a sort of flashback, or I guess it goes chronologically in that sense then, where Ichigo's walking along with his mother through the rain. They encounter a little girl, and Ichigo decides to go and give her his umbrella so that she won't get wet. And he's like, this little boy at this point, he's like 6, so it's adorable. But then when the girl turns around, suddenly everything goes black, and Ichigo comes to consciousness again, with his mother lying dead on top of him, big bloody gashes across her back. And then we suddenly just cut to the present day. We only get to see that bit. We don't get to know like what actually happened, because that is going to be explained later. It sets things up very well like that. And that is something that was already in the source material, but it just comes really well to fruition in this movie adaptation. And then we just see Ichigo go about his day, beating up thugs and doing good things for the ghosts in the neighborhood, and trying to protect his sisters. And then, of course, the real monsters show up, the Hollows, which are corrupted ghosts that have died with a grudge and have eaten other souls and become more powerful and now are real threats. And then this Soul Reaper that I mentioned before comes in, Rukia. And she finds it very difficult to fight off this monster. She gets injured, and the only way that she can see to defeat it is by stabbing her sword into Ichigo's chest and channel her power into him and make him a Soul Reaper for just a moment. Now, this goes a little bit differently from how she planned, and she ends up losing her own powers, and Ichigo becomes a Soul Reaper basically permanently. He defeats the monster, he defeats the Hollow, and the two of them end up living together. She's like secretly living with him and going to school together, with the purpose of Ichigo becoming stronger, so that then he has enough energy that he can give back to Rukia. She can become a Soul Reaper again, and she can go back home to where the society of these Soul Reapers is. And through this you kind of like run into like a variety of minor characters that still leave their mark. Like you have Ichigo's love interest, Orihime, who has a crush on him, but he just sees her as a friend, sort of. That's sort of how it is at the start, at least, and that's we don't really get a development of that, because in the manga that takes a lot longer. You see another student reveal himself to him as being having spiritual powers of his own, where he can like summon a bow made of light that allows him to also kill those hungry ghosts that he can see as well. But when this archer challenges Ichigo, because he thinks, hey, you're a Soul Reaper, and my clan and your people have beef with each other, so I'm gonna keep that in mind. So I'm going to summon Hollows. I'm gonna lure them. I'm gonna crush some bait and make them come here, and we're gonna see which one of us is better at dealing with these hungry ghosts. That ends up drawing the attention of some other Soul Reapers who have also been wondering, hey, where's Rukia? She's supposed to be back here a long time ago. And Ichigo ends up into trouble with that, because these other Soul Reapers are much more powerful. And of course, we end up kind of like going from fight to fight, from very difficult situation with like this, with various hungry ghosts showing up, to eventually the ghost that killed Ichigo's mother showing up. And he's been like tormenting himself all this time, thinking like he was responsible indirectly for his mother's death. But no, it was this specific hollow. And it's not like emotionally crushing or really touching or anything, but you can definitely it is definitely depicted and acted very well, that part, I thought. Now he ends up defeating the Hollow, and he ends up getting a little bit of help from his friends to save some other people and get them out of the way. Then the Soul Reapers show up again to kill him, so they can forcibly remove his powers and put them back into Rukia. And he ends up defeating one of them and convincing them that he should be able to live, and he can just give his powers to Rukia and they can go back on their merry way. And they have a goodbye, and their memories end up wiped of Ichigo and his friends. So at the end, Rukia goes back to Soul Society, where the Soul Reapers live, and Ichigo goes back to his normal life, but now just feels a little different. And his friends notice that as well. But that is where it leaves us, and where it leaves them. And if you ask some of the fans of the manga or anime, that might be a good call. A lot of people seem to think that the first arc or two are the best one in the entire manga, and that it goes on for a bit too long after that. And I share that opinion in some sense. I think it's still cool. There's a lot of cool powers being shown. There's a lot of cool fashion. Like the manga artist is really good with drawing outfits and unique character designs. But things definitely get dragged out a bit too much. But if you watch this movie, well, you don't have that problem. So you might as well check it out. I watched it on Netflix myself, and it might be available in your country on Netflix as well. And otherwise, you can just Google justwatch.com and find out where you can watch it. Otherwise, there's other ways. Have a splendid evening or other time of day, and I will catch you tomorrow.